Kwentuhan. 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 Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie, the podcast.
Hello. Good day, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, my first ever podcast here in Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie, the podcast. I believe, you believe, and we all believe na ito ang podcast na para sa'yo. Anybody can listen. You, your mom, your classmate, your lolos and lolas, your neighbor John next door. This podcast is definitely for everyone. I am your podcaster boy from Ilocos Sur, your boy Jerick Onie, and we will going to talk about life, study, work, play, entertainment, basically life in general, and of course, the discussions of being human.
Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie.
So before anything else, I just want to greet all the listeners a happy Burmans. We are already on our third to the last month of 2021, and we are down to our last 74 days before Christmas. So the year has been still pretty stressful, of course, with the current pandemic, making our outdoor plans on hold. That's why as citizens, we should participate in eradicating this global pandemic through vaccinations. Magpabakuna ka na, sabi ng DOH. Ayun, para in due time, our outdoor endeavors will be soon achieved again.
Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie, the podcast.
So going back to the podcast, the topic that we will going to tackle in this episode is something that all people can relate to. A lot of people are having a hard time achieving this and making it consistent in the lifestyle. In everyone's lifestyle rather. So, our topic for this episode is... Drumroll please. Productivity. In this episode, we will going to talk on first, what productivity really is, second, the misconceptions of productivity, and lastly, how to achieve it.
Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie.
A lot of us would hear the word productivity nowadays, especially in social media. We maybe see a lot of posts of pictures and videos of people in the internet being busy about something. It could be about class, work, gardening, business, working out, you name it. And we can see that they also use a hashtag for it. Can you guess the hashtag? Of course, hashtag productivity, obviously. Something that we continuously see in the likes of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But behind all these self-proclaimed productivity posts, the question is, what does productivity really mean? In this segment, we will be talking about the 3 definitions of productivity and how important it is to learn and master. First is workplace productivity. According to axahealth.co.uk, in the workplace, productivity could be defined as the amount of work or output that an employee produces during their shift. So, looking in a workplace perspective, it is on how many outputs an employee or a person can create in a single time frame. Like for example, let's use a baker as a reference. Productivity in a baker's workplace is on how many breads he can bake in a single shift. This is all explained by understanding the productivity's root word. And that root word is product. Productivity really is product-induced, where the outcomes are seen to matter. This definition also let us understand that material outputs from your works really matter on how productive you are. But of course, this is only applicable in the workplace, having said that the context is an employee where they work for an organization that creates product. Second is practical productivity. For a second definition, according to TonyRobbins.com, productivity is a way to measure efficiency, an approach on focusing on ways people can systematize and better manage their lives so they have more time to do what they want. In this definition, it let us understand that being productive is being wise in using your time in general, especially using our time to make outputs that are worth it and outputs that is fully beneficial. This definition is more of a practical trait compared to the workplace productivity. As said earlier, a workplace productivity just focuses on how many a person can create in a given time frame. But in a practical productivity, the person does things to have full benefit from it without wasting any materials used in the pursuit of being productive and efficient. A great example would be time management. In time management, people can be practical in doing things just by being practical in managing the time. For us to do a lot of things that are beneficial and doesn't waste any utility use is to really organize things and also organize the time you'll use. Let's say, for example, you would want to write 3 essays, work out, watch a movie, clean the house, review for a quiz, all to be done in a whole day. For you to achieve so many in a day is to really manage your time and set what specific time when you'll do each one of them. As we understand the example stated, they are all productive works, but something that just sets them apart by just work is how the person will use their time efficiently. Again, by not wasting even a single material to achieve their endeavors in a day. Now, we understand why Tony Robbins said that productivity is a way to measure efficiency and ways of people systematize better management. It's all being practical in everything. Practical about time and practical about materials used to acquire the whole benefit of the work. Third is character productivity. For a third definition, writer Charles Duhigg defines productivity as making certain choices in certain ways that moves us from being merely busy to genuinely productive. This definition literally centers on the character of the person. Charles Duhigg said that productivity is a choice, which is really true. In any work or in any endeavor, it was first a thought and turned to a choice if you'll execute it or not. A choice that will make you productive or not. But something that Charles Duhigg said is that our choices will determine us if we are just busy or genuinely productive. An example would be explaining how powerful if we just choose and think to be productive, then we will be productive unconsciously. When I am working on something, I am thinking that this specific craft is something that would make me productive. Then as I go on, I'll find myself being productive about it, having fun and learning a lot without me even realizing. I don't know if you already knew this, but there is an ideology that is booming in the internet right now. This ideology is called self-manifestation. This is just by having a thought in your mind about something, and because you are focused on achieving it, your body will find ways to really achieve it. That is something that is already applied in the name of productivity. Sometimes we can be very sulky and lazy to do things, but just by thinking the positive outcomes if we do it, then we will be driven enough to be productive. It's like manifesting the good outcomes, or it's like you are already foreshadowing it, so it will boost you to be productive, to genuinely work without thinking that you're just merely busy. So, to sum up all the definitions and to have a quick summary, productivity can be defined and understood in 3 ways. First is workplace productivity. Workplace productivity which is tangible, and that is product induced and the measurement of how many works you can do in a certain time frame. This is the literal definition of productivity because it literally takes on explaining the modes of productivity as a tangible phenomenon and not as a mentality alone. Second is the practical productivity. Practical productivity that centers on how we can manage and organize our time to achieve quality tasks and to achieve something great without wasting materials. This take is centered on how we can be efficient in our actions so we can be productive without wasting anything. And lastly is the character productivity. Character productivity where our mentality is essential in being productive. It is setting your mind into it that you'll acquire the best outcome and benefits. Just by thinking that we will be productive in the medium of self-manifestation is a good practice to acquire enough drive to be productive. In this way, when we are working, we wouldn't feel that we are just merely busy, where being tired is the outcome. But We are working because we're already foreshadowing for the good outcomes and benefits to have the enough drive to be productive.
Kwentuhan.
After talking about the definitions of productivity, we are now on our next segment, which we will going to talk about the misconceptions or the common misconceptions of productivity. The first misconception that I will tell you is, I think, the most common of them all. That is thinking that being exhausted is productivity. A lot of people think this way, and I also admit that before. I was also a believer that if you are very, very tired, then it might mean that you're also very productive. But again, this idea is very wrong in many areas. When we say we are exhausted, it only means that we are already burned out to the extent that our body can process in a normal state again, compared to when our body was still in square one. I also want to add that if your body is exhausted, it just means that you cannot already produce quality works, having said that you are very tired. You also cannot think clearly because your brain is already worn out through the things that you had done that caused you exhaustion. So to add an example, I want to share my personal take on this. When I was in senior high school, there was a time when I wasn't really procrastinating. I love the sense that I can finish a lot of requirements in a short period of time, with a deadline being so far away. Just a disclaimer, of course, I did this without pressure because it was my choice. But by pushing in a lot of work in a single day, I think it grew a self-fulfillment in my end until it became a habit that also became really negative. Because it became a habit, I was always eager to finish 6 requirements in a day, even if the workload should need at least 4 days to finish. I was stuck in the habit that I wouldn't sleep that much just to fit in my personal schedule and to finish all the requirements at once. The habit went to months and the negative outcome just came unprecedented. Because of the habit, I always settled to the requirements that I can finish in a day rather than use the whole given duration, for example a week, to double check, assess, and improve my requirements, which totally I didn't do. Because of that, I received lower marks that made me feel regret. But I am not saying that I am not contented to my marks, but I just can see how my outputs would be way more better, as my grades would be higher if I didn't rush it and settle to the things that I can do in a day. I also got sick because of not sleeping and trying hard to finish all requirements in a day where I shouldn't be. This example alone can explain why exhaustion doesn't mean you're being productive, because as far as we all know, one of the meanings of productivity is working to have the best outcome possible. That's why the connotation of exhaustion parallel to productivity should be shrugged off, because you'll never achieve productivity if you are not well holistically. So for our second misconception, this is still connected to the first one, but it is more focused on the health of the mind. And that misconception is neglecting your mental health in the name of productivity. As said earlier, a negative mentality of productivity is exhaustion. But sometimes the only exhaustion that we acknowledge is the exhaustion of the physical body alone. One thing that we sometimes forget is when we are tired physically, our brain also does. By working on anything, the whole holistic body is utilized. It's always both the physical and the mental. You may wonder, why am I talking about exhaustion again when it is already covered earlier? The answer is just that I want the listeners to understand how dangerous it is to neglect our mental health just by working really hard to the point it becomes unhealthy. In the end of the day, the first thing we use to just even move our body is what? Our brain. We think first before we do something. So just imagine if you would use your brain continuously in a day without resting, then you can already visualize how mentally draining it is. The question is, how can you even be productive again if your brain stops working because it's already worn out? In this question, I think we already know the answer. We can't. How can we expect to be productive when our brain, who thinks about productiveness, cannot function already? That's why we really need to incorporate rest from time to time. Bestie, You're not a robot, you're a human too. Resting is the most human thing to do because if you'll not, then be scared on the negative outcomes on what will happen in your mental health. We don't want that to happen, right, bestie? Right. Mental health is really as important as physical health. And in the name of productivity, now we understand why taking care of our mental health is paramount. Now that we covered two of the most common misconceptions, the next misconceptions of productivity will be focused on the misconceptions that are obvious or the things that we can already see in our bare eyes. So the next misconception is called the performative productivity. Just by understanding the root word perform, you can already understand what the misconception is all about. The word perform can sound as a positive word, but in productivity, there is a negative connotation behind and in front of it. Performative productivity in a sense that people, especially on social media, would post their workspaces to show to other people that they are productive. This culture was becoming a norm in social media platforms where many students and employees would do to have self-affirmation that they are busy on the day or they are working productively by posting it online. The only thing that makes this really negative is that it creates a false definition of productivity, in a sense that you'll question yourself if the picture that you posted was really from productiveness, or maybe you are just ego tripping and layouting your workspace, making it messy, take a picture on it, then post and caption it with #productivity. Now we can understand how powerful social media is, that it creates a false perception of what productivity must be. Other people may say, social media is a free platform where we are liberated to post what we want, so it doesn't really matter if our post is fake or not. Yes, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that we should stop posting anything just because we are not sure if it's genuine productivity or just performative. What I just want to tell you guys is how performative productivity just creates a false view of productivity. Because many people can get false affirmations that they did something in a day but actually didn't. This is to clarify that performative productivity shouldn't be a question on thinking if your friends in Facebook or Instagram are posting real productivity. It's more of like a you question. You must ask yourself, am I really practicing genuine productivity in my post? Or did I just post that for ego tripping to construct a mentality that I am doing something even if I'm not? See? We can see now that it always boils down on our choices. If we choose to follow the trend and be fake, or choosing to post the truth that would also make real affirmations. In the end of the day, something that is really rewarding about being productive is the moment we receive self-gratification after doing something that is true. So imagine if your productivity is just made up, just so you can attain an affirmation from it. In this case, you are not fooling anybody, but yourself. Performative productivity can still be seen circulating online. We don't know if they are real or not, but there are ways to stop it. That is to post the genuine one for you to have genuine affirmation. In this way, you are definitely cultivating that real productivity is achieved from real work. Coming down on number 4, the fourth misconception is believing that productivity is only about working in a desk full of papers. I think with majority of everyone's generation nowadays that grew up watching series and movies, especially the Western ones, we would always see settings in the workplace, office, a company. We always see the leading character in a table full of papers and then they will be accomplished after work. This made a culture that being productive is just being in front of a desk job, doing a lot of papers. Oops! I am not saying that desk jobs are not real productivity. They actually are, because it's work and people make money from it. But it's just that because of the movies, it created a mentality that desk jobs alone are something that is considered productive. That's why it's important to talk about it for us to learn that productivity is more than a desk job and how broad it is that many people don't even know. To set a general tone, have you already heard the saying, "Don't ever forget to play"? This saying can literally explain how broad productivity is. When you are at your house, cleaning your room is productivity, and so is working out. Swimming in the beach is productivity, and so is hiking. Playing your favorite instrument is productivity, and so is creating your digital artwork. And the list goes on and on and on. This explains that productivity can be anything as long as you are doing something that has a start and a finish, a point A to point B in another term. One thing that this makes us understand is learning to incorporate recreational activities to productivity. You might have already learned about recreational activities in your physical education subject, where the definition is moving to have fun. Yes, you heard it right. Productivity is not always about stressing out and doing paperwork before the deadline strikes. Productivity can also be done in leisure, to have fun. One example would be exercising. It is not a work for school nor for an organization, but it is a work to yourself. It is a work that is not done indoors. But of course, except for the gym, but you know what I'm saying. The workouts in the likes of jogging is done outside to have fun and enjoying the environment. Maybe that's why it's called working out, because it's outside. I'm not sure about that, but it does make sense, right? Right. Again, productivity is not only isolated to desk jobs. Maybe what you're doing right now is productive. I mean, listening to this podcast and gaining knowledge from it can be considered as productivity. Fair enough? Fair enough. And the last one for our misconception segment is the misconception that productivity is just achieved in doing it by yourself. This is one of the misconceptions that we see all the time, especially if we really want to be independent about something, or in the negative side, there is something that just comes along called pride. I think that doing any work that consists of just you is okay because it shows how responsible you are in having the capability to do a work all by yourself. The thought process, the preparation, the work process, up until it's done. It shows how you can stand alone in achieving works. But something that a lot of people forgot, that in working through productivity, it shouldn't always be done alone. There will always be someone who will help you achieve something. No man is an island, as they say. There will always be someone that became a bridge on the endeavor you made. Having said that productivity is a process, productivity needs a lot of aspects to consider, where these aspects are not only done by one human. Bestie, once again, we are not robot. We are human, and one of the most human trait is not doing any work that only consists by himself. In a mentality perspective, it teaches us that working productively will not always be credited by your thinking alone, because somewhere or another, some thoughts and actions was still done with the help of others. This misconception helps us understand that with all the tiredness, the exhaustion, and the mental drainage that we could possibly acquire can be lessened if we let other people to work with us. It's acknowledging that not all the times you alone can always make it. Productivity is not always a one-man work. To achieve productivity, it needs a collective effort to achieve the goal of something. That's why doing it by yourself will not always work, and the possibility of you getting exhausted is much higher. Now that we already covered about productivity's definition and its misconceptions, we are now down on talking about how to achieve productivity full stop. So our main mission in this last segment is how to achieve productivity 101 with Jerick Onie. So the first and the most important tip or step to productivity would be setting the mindset. Having the right mindset before anything else is the key. As said earlier, productivity is a process and it takes steps on achieving it. It just so happens that setting your right mindset is the first to execute. When we say set the right mindset, it pertains on really focusing your brain or your thoughts on the work that you will do. It's having no distraction nor side hustles because it just causes you to be unproductive on a certain thing because you're also focusing on another thing that just makes you confused on what to prioritize. Speaking of prioritization, this is the perfect word to describe productivity. I mean, multitasking can be achieved, and yes, it works to many people, but I just want to remind you that multitasking doesn't always get the work done in time, nor having a quality output because you are not focusing on one master. In order for productivity to be executed well is literally set aside first the distractions and focus on the thing that you are really working on. Another step would be you should organize things. I think this sounds cliche because we always hear that to be productive, you should have a to-do list prior on making the work. You would also hear that an organized or clean workspace is essential. These tips may sound cliche, but bestie, it does really work. First and foremost, having a to-do list just makes your work easier because you already outlined the process of your work. The thought process, the planning, the preparation, up until the final step. It's all organized. This doesn't only help you to have a faster duration time, but would also make you assured that the outcome of your work would be in quality. Now, let's talk about having a clean and organized workspace. Have you ever wondered why sometimes your mood can really be affected by how your workspace looks like? Yes, it really is. Of course, when it's dirty, messy, and untidy, then how can you have the drive to even do something in a space that doesn't look like a workspace at all, right? But do you ever wonder that if the workspace is clean, there's this inviting aura that drives you to do your work productively? I think there's something that workspaces can affect our psychology and productivity. So the next time you'll do something productive, might as well assure that your table is clean to have the enough drive in achieving a certain goal. Another step would be always considering to take rest or take breaks. As discussed earlier, connecting exhaustion as parallel to productivity is a misconception. Let's always remind ourselves that being productive means having the best outcome we can inculcate in our work. By understanding this, how can we come up with the best outcome if we are mentally and physically tired? That's why it's vital to take rest from time to time because, honey, sleep and rest doesn't only make you look savage, but can also make your work sleek as the heavens above. I don't know if you understand the context, but I think you understood what I mean, so. And coming down to the last step, more of like the golden step, which is being not motivation oriented. Just by hearing the word motivation, you may say that it is a positive word, and why do I make it seem as negative? Okay, let me explain myself. It is really a positive word, but in terms of productivity, we shouldn't always depend on it. We should still have the ability to take action even when there's no motivation around us. Most of the times, we can observe ourselves that when we are motivated about something, we have this mood that becomes strikingly productive on doing something, which is a good take. But the big problem is, what if there's no motivation around you to start your work? Would you just shrug the work that you should supposed to do just because you are not motivated enough? That's unethical, right? Would you just wait until the next motivation to strike just for you to start? Basically, this is a problem that a lot of people are going through, to the point that because they are not motivated enough, they'll just apply this mañana habit that would resort them to just leave the itinerary for tomorrow. The habit will go on and on and on to the extent that it's already nearing the deadline. And then the final resort would be using the near deadline as a motivation. In this case, it's not productivity anymore, but a big problematic procrastination. We wouldn't want that to happen. That's why having a responsibility and enough discipline to act now is something that productivity believes in. If you are not 100% driven, you can start baby steps because at least you're doing something on it. Or just start it now because as you start working, you'll forget that you're unmotivated at first up until you'll finish the work even without you noticing it. That's why just having the thought of starting is already a big step to productivity.
Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie.
I hope you learned a lot in this episode about what is productivity, the misconceptions, and how to achieve it. And I hope you'll apply these learnings in your next work. Being stagnant and not doing anything for progress is not cool anymore. Stand up and start creating something you are passionate about. Let's always be productive and keep ourselves afloat. Again, I am your podcaster boy from Ilocos Sur, your boy Jerick Onie that talks about life, study, work, play, entertainment, basically life in general, and of course the discussions of being human. Stay updated every Friday at 8 p.m. to catch my new episodes. I believe, you believe, and we all believe na ito ang podcast na para sa'yo. This is Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie, the podcast.
Kwentuhan. Kwentuhan with Jerick Onie, the podcast.